Please note that this content is for adults only. Viewer discretion advised. If you haven't yet, hit the subscribe, like, and share. Hello everyone and welcome back to another live stream with me, Grizzly. This is Grizzly True Crime, and today we're going to have very special guest Lawyer Lee with us again. I'll quickly give you a one-page recap of the case just for those of you who missed, week one of the recap, just to know what on earth are we talking about. We're talking about the Crystal Rogers case. So the trial of Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson for the murder and disappearance of Crystal Rogers began on June 24th of 2025 in Warren County, Kentucky. So welcome to everyone who's from Kentucky, at the Warren County Justice Center in Bowling Green due to extensive publicity in Nelson County. Opening statements began on June 25th of 2025, and Lawyer Lee has been in the courtroom. The trial is a no-body homicide case. They've never found Crystal's body. Shame. The prosecution relies heavily on circumstantial evidence, including phone records, witness testimony, and surveillance footage to build their case. The state actually rested this past week on July 1st of 2025. They had 38 witnesses over 5 days. The defense then rested on July 4th, and they had 6 witnesses over 3 days. And so the next thing that's going to happen is closing arguments set for Monday, the 7th of July, and they said jury deliberations will start the next day. So they send them home, they come back the next day, and that's when they will have jury instructions, I guess, and start their deliberations. So that's pretty much what's happening. And just so you can see pictures again one more time, Brooks Houck was Crystal Rogers' boyfriend at the time. He's on trial. Crystal Rogers was 33 years old, the mother of 5, last seen July 3rd of, that's a typo, 2015. And Nick Houck is Brooks's brother, and he's a little bit shady too, but unindicted. He's called an unindicted co-conspirator. Steve Lawson was already convicted of criminal conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with evidence on May 30th of 2025. Joseph Lawson and Brooks Houck are now on trial. Joseph charged with the same things that his father was, Brooks with murder and tampering with evidence. And on the right-hand side, you have Nick Houck and Rosemary Houck. Rosemary is the mother of Brooks and Nick, and she is also an unindicted co-conspirator. So that's where we're at right now. All right, so those are some questions for Lawyer Lee. So I'm going to bring this over here and welcome Lawyer Lee. You're back. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be back with the Grizzlies.
Yes, the Grizzlies love Lawyer Lee. If you guys haven't subscribed yet, please do go and subscribe. I'll show you your channel quickly again. I'm sure you know about it, but if you don't, or if you're not subscribed, please go there. There's lots of great content there. I also recently shared Lawyer Lee's video on the Brian Koberger plea agreement and why the state would even offer that to him. So go over there. I'm sure you'll love it, right? I love it. I'm sure you're going to love it. All right. So Nightbot will be sharing the link and the mods as well. Okay. So how was the week is a general question to start with. How was this week at trial?
It was a wild week. We had absolutely crazy testimony. The prosecution brought in much, much more testimony, very specifically statements by people and there was a lot of question. We'd started that last Friday, and then it increased this week. We had multiple people come in saying that particularly Joey Lawson had made various statements implicating his role in the disappearance of Crystal Rogers. We had, and by extension, it was Brooks Houck, but really this was more of a week focused on Joey as opposed to Brooks. And then, of course, the defense response.
Finally, because Joey has been just sort of, as you said, in the corner, not really mentioned. It's kind of weird that he's on trial at the same time. But so they brought some receipts for Joseph Lawson this week, by the sounds of it.
They did, depending on what exactly you would call a receipt, right? Just how strong they were is going to depend on what the jury thinks.
Yes. So that actually brings us to the first question that I have for you today. You noted in your coverage. So you guys, when I say you noted, it's from Lawyer Lee's coverage. Every day she did lunchtime live streams and full day coverage, in the evenings as well, about everything that happened in the day with detailed notes, right? That's why I recommend Lawyer Lee, go check it out. So you noted that the jury actually appeared bored and disengaged during Charlie Girdley's testimony, despite its jaw-dropping nature. What do you think this suggests about their trust in his conflicting stories, and how might it impact their view of the prosecution's case? And just for those who don't know, who's Charlie Girdley?
He was one of the pivotal witnesses for the state, really important witness. He was someone who knew the Lawsons. He had worked with Brooks Houck, and so he knew them from work. And he had a number of bombshell claims about what they had said. Steve Lawson supposedly told him, hey, Brooks wants to get rid of the old lady. I'm not the one for the job, but I think you are. And Charlie said he just laughed and passed it off as not applying to him. And then he had Joseph Lawson saying that he had buried Crystal with the skid steer and nobody would ever find her. And then there was another comment that everybody in the courtroom either didn't hear or heard differently. I'm going to give you the judge's summary from the last day when he denied the motions for directed verdict, that Joey Lawson said his plan, or what he had done, was to pull Crystal's teeth and her hair, and then the hogs would do the rest. And just horrifying statements. Now, the problem with that is that Charlie Girdley was possibly the most impeached witness I've ever seen. They played through, and we heard it a second time with another witness. They went through his interrogation, and he really interviewed because he wasn't directly implicated. And it was so coercive. It was unbelievable. He told story after story after story. It changed and changed and changed and they kept seeming to ask him, well, that's not good enough. Yeah, that won't work. We need you to have a different story. The prosecutor came in and said, yeah, that's not really the story. That can't be right. It could be this, but it can't be that. And he kept changing his story until finally he came up with the one they presented at trial. It was a mess. It was so confusing. And he looked like he was clearly lying. I mean, he admitted he was lying on some of them. And it just made you think, okay, can I trust him? So it was so important to the Commonwealth's case. But I was really surprised because this is huge testimony, right? This is really, really important. But the jury is kind of like looking around. Nobody is really paying any attention by the end. And my theory was that they just decided, we're going to have to draw an X through Charlie because we have no idea which story he told is the truth. That was just
my word too. So they showed clips of his police interviews so they could literally see how they're molding him like clay to suit their story.
They did not during his testimony, but they brought in a witness to talk about the police interrogation as a whole. And he actually played clips from that. And you could see it. I mean, you could see what they were saying. You saw when the prosecutor came in and said, I'll make you a deal. I'll help you. I'm going to reach out a hand to you, grab it. And so you got to see that.
Oh, no, that sounds terrible. I mean, just from hearing your reporting on it and just reading some of the reports out there on it, yeah, his testimony sounds like he had a lot of dirt on them, and yet the jury might not believe him. So what was my question to you again? What do you think this suggests about their trust in his conflicting stories? Well, it sounds like they checked out. And how might it impact their view of the prosecution's case?
I think the biggest issue will be it's really hard to get a statement like that out of your head. I mean, you cannot hear that about the teeth and the hair and the hogs without remembering that. I mean, that is stuck in my head. And I think it will be stuck in the jury's heads as well, depending on what exactly they heard, depending on which version of it they heard. I think they're going to remember that. So I don't think it's possible to just push it to the side. I think they're going to consider this. Even though I think at the time they were thinking this is ridiculously coercive and untrustworthy, I think in the end it'll still be stuck in their heads. And it was more than one statement too. It wasn't just the teeth, hair, and hogs. There were others as well.
It's so scary to hear those statements because along the way in covering the case, I saw a lot of comments already wondering about that. Like, what if That's how they got rid of her body. So to even hear that somebody else can almost corroborate that based on their statements that's pretty scary, because they never found Crystal's body. For those who don't know and you're only joining now, this is a no body case, a circumstantial evidence case. So his testimony is so important. Oh my word. Okay, so then the defense's expert, Dr. You could tell me how they said it. There's Neuschatz is how we said it. Is Neuschatz?
I think Neuschatz is how he said it.
Okay, so he's a psychologist, and he testified that the interrogations of this guy we just talked about, Charlie Girdley and Heather Snellen, who we talked about in week 1, violated the Reed technique 314 and 350 times. Is that correct, respectively? That's a lot.
Yes. Yeah, and what he did was he would go through and play a little portion of what had been said, and and talk about the fact that this was so coercive, or this was they were diminishing her testimony and saying, yeah, we don't buy that, we don't believe that, and it just went on and on and on. I mean, it absolutely was coercive. I was really horrified when I first heard the description of it, and then seeing it played. It's like, wow, that really happened, because they really did seem to mold the testimony as opposed to accept what was stated by the witnesses. And I do understand the need for interrogations and the need for finding out information that people will be reluctant to give you. I mean, people aren't eager to come out and implicate themselves in having heard about a murder. They don't want to do that. I understand that. But this went way, way beyond that. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Can you pull me back into what your question was?
I think so. Let me go back to it. Wait, there's the skid steer. Okay, so what do you think this suggests about their trust in his conflicting story? Oh, no, you answered that one. The next one with this Dr. Neuschatz is that the Reed technique was violated 314 and 350 times respectively. How damaging do you believe that these allegations of coercion are to the prosecution's key witnesses? And do you think the jury will see this as a critical issue?
I think it's especially critical in this case because there isn't any other evidence. There is no body, there is no eyewitness, there isn't even a known crime scene or a known mechanism of murder. There's none of that. Everything is just circumstantial. And so the statements by people would have been so important and so useful to the Commonwealth, but now they don't really exist. They can't really use those, or at least they are somewhat discredited. Here's what I mean. I think the battle comes down to this. Brooks Houck's statement and description of what happened just was, in my opinion, really not very believable. Nick Houck's really not very believable. It just didn't flow. It didn't fit. It didn't fit with the evidence that they were able to get. On the other hand, you stack on the defense side the lack of evidence and then the real push to get these people to say exactly what would fill in the gaps and plug any problems for the prosecution. And I think that's where the decision will be made by the jury. And they may have some problems with that, but they are going to be looking really hard at what Brooks Houck said. That's going to be the most important words of the trial, will be the ones he said in his interview that was played for the jury.
Yes, I think so as well, especially lying about Crystal's phone. That always sticks in my mind. If I was on the jury, I'd be like, the things he said, where he said he was, all of that could add up, but still to actually convict someone in a circumstantial evidence case with then these witnesses that should be so important, but now they were coerced, apparently, allegedly. That's very, very scary. Wow. Okay. So Stefan Griby says the Reed technique is kind of useless anyway. Yeah, it risks a lot. So, okay. So I hope the jury will, I don't know what they can actually do with that. I wonder if they'll just disregard their testimonies or what they're going to do at all. So this is a picture, by the way, everyone, of Joseph Lawson, who's also on trial with Brooks Houck, who loyally says featured a little more this week at last, because before that he was kind of just sitting there in the room with his buddy, just also there with his own attorney. Okay, so Charlie Girdley's claims about Joseph Lawson asking him to tow a vehicle and stating that Crystal was buried with a skid steer were explosive but heavily impeached, as you said. Did the prosecution's redirect salvage his credibility, or do you think the defense's cross-examination left his testimony too unreliable for the jury?
And I want to add that there were a couple of other witnesses, and I do think this was important, who corroborated the involvement of Joey. They didn't have as much quite sensational to say, but they both corroborated Joey saying that at least Steve Lawson was involved, and obviously that he knew about it. And I think what will happen is the jury will kind of stack those on top of each other and decide, okay, this maybe seems a little off, but I think it's going to be hard to move out of their heads. As far as kind of how it worked this week, we heard a lot more from Joey's team than we did in the past week. They really played into the fact that he wasn't anywhere in the case, but they just stayed quiet, and they might stand up and say, I know you haven't heard from me. Here's one question. Sit down. That was it. That was very minimal involvement. But I think that they couldn't run from this week because Joey was specifically involved this week. They couldn't just ignore that. It was right there. But as far as what the jury will do with it, I think Brooks and Joey are pretty tied together. I don't think there's one way they convict one and they don't convict the other. That's my guess.
And it sounds like they didn't call Stephen Lawson to testify, right?
I remain confused about that. And that actually goes into one of the other questions you had. Well, we can talk about that then. If you want me to just flow into it, one of the questions you had was, what about the fact that they're filing these documents under seal? What's frustrating about that? And what's frustrating to me about that is I can't understand all of the ins and outs of the trial if I can't see all of those motions and what people were debating and discussing and why. And one of the huge questions for me, and I asked around and absolutely no one knew because of how many things were filed under seal, why didn't Steve Lawson testify here? In my opinion, he had waived his Fifth Amendment privilege by taking the stand in his own case. So I think they could have forced that. Maybe the deal was the defense didn't dare because he had talked about how he and Joey went to this vehicle, and so that would be too damning. And the prosecution didn't want it because there's no controlling him. Who knows what he'll say when he gets on the stand? So that it may just be that nobody actually wanted him there. It was too much of a risk on both sides, and that may be the reason. But for that, it's very unusual that so much was under seal, even during the trial. They were filing briefs under seal in the middle of this case I've been following this and getting the documents for more than a year now, but document after document would just come across as sealed, and that's all we received. And there was no understanding what they were arguing about or why. To me,
that is very odd.
It was very strange.
It's a red flag.
I think so. Yeah, I definitely agree. And as far as you had asked me, in a question you wrote to me about, what does this mean in a public when it goes on into trial? I've never seen that before. Typically, by the time you get to trial, things are public. You are anticipating that the public is going to find out about it at trial. Anything that you might have hoped would be secret, you're not going to be hoping that anymore. So I was shocked when I saw these documents coming across as sealed in trial.
So I wonder what that is all about. That was my question. Why do you think the secrecy persisted in a public trial? Like, what is it? Obviously, it's sealed, so we don't know.
I don't know.
How did it affect your ability to provide comprehensive coverage? I mean, I don't think it affected at all. Your coverage was very comprehensive, but was there something? I'm sure you wish you could report on whatever that is.
Right. And a lot of the background fighting is very important for understanding the appeal, if nothing else, because those are the grounds that are going to be on appeal. So I can't give people an idea of how strong the appeal will be if I don't know what evidence got ruled out. Then I'm just stuck with, what I can see in the courtroom is, but I bet there was more evidence that people wanted from both sides.
Where do you think, how do you think the case is going so far? Because I felt like it just feels a little risky from the outside, just looking at the local coverage, your coverage. It just feels like this case has a risk of justice not being served. Do you get that vibe at all?
It definitely has a risk that there could be either Commonwealth or defense verdict. I mean, I think that's possible given the facts and the evidence that we have right here. But I think the prosecution took a bit of a risk that the prior attorney hadn't been unwilling to do. The prior prosecutor before Shane Young was appointed had not been willing to take the risk of this. I mean, it had been 8 years or so until they finally decided to prosecute Brooks Houck and Joey Lawson and Steve Lawson as well. But so for a long time, they just decided, yeah, we're not going to do anything with this. We're too worried about the lack of evidence. And then ultimately you had specifically these, somebody was willing to go ahead and take the risk. It is a hard case in that there's not even DNA. It's not even like they found Crystal's DNA in the burn pit. One of the most effective arguments, I feel like I'm talking too much. Do you want me?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. I'm enjoying it. Am I listening too much? No, keep going.
One of the most effective arguments that they made, they put on a whole witness, the defense did, to go through all of the work that had been done in order to try to find out who killed Crystal Rogers. And they searched multiple bodies of water, the pond on the Brooks farm. They brought in divers. They used drones. They did DNA analysis. They went all over. They did more than 70 search warrants. And that was just from Nelson County, not counting FBI and other search warrants. They did everything they knew how. Very unusual argument for the defense to be arguing, hey, it was a great investigation. Usually it would flip the other way. But in all of that, they didn't find anything. They didn't find DNA or anything. And that's going to be the closing argument for Brooks Houck. And then Joey will tag along with that as well.
So sorry to go off track here for a second, but I read that, or I'd heard in your coverage or in the local coverage, whatever, I'd been trying to watch all of it. There was underwear, women's clothing found under a driveway somewhere. What in the hell was that? I know they said it wasn't linked to Crystal Rogers. It wasn't her DNA, but what was that all about?
They at one location at an address, they dug up a sidewalk and driveway that had been poured right about the time that Crystal Rogers disappeared. And I recall it being connected to the arrest of Joey Lawson, as if maybe he was leading them to that. But as it turned out later, it was Steve really who was trying to strike the deal. So it may have been Steve. Underneath that, they said, and we'd heard nothing about that the whole trial. The Commonwealth never introduced this. But what they said was they found a pair of women's underwear and this shirt, and they tested them for DNA. They were not able to make any conclusive determinations, whether it be Crystal Rogers or anyone else, and they consumed all of it in the course of that testing, which is not only disappointing, but a little odd. Typically, they cut patches out of fabric. Maybe it was really destroyed by now and it was not in good shape, but they normally cut patches. So if you destroyed a bit of it, you wouldn't destroy the whole thing. And so it was shocking to learn that during the defense case as opposed to during the prosecution case.
Oh dear. I'm worried about the outcome of this. I really hope there'll be justice for Crystal, but I know they can't just convict someone either if they don't have the evidence. So I just hope so. I just really want to welcome everyone coming in from Courtroom Confidential. Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. I was there for quite some time today and then I had to go live. So thank you for being here. Also, by the way, I'm wearing pink, everyone, and a different lipstick than you guys are all used to. Everyone always asks what my lipstick is. Today's different. I'm trying to dress in support of Team Crystal, which they wear pink. So that's why I'm doing that. Southern Kelly B said, loyally, are they able to mention Tommy's murder as well at the trial, or have they thrown that out as well?
Well, I can't tell you whether they argued that in motions, but it did not appear anywhere in the trial. At no point did they mention, and they very carefully tiptoed around how Tommy died or anything like that. There was a reference, I think, to the fact that her father was deceased, but no suggestion that there was any mystery around it. No suggestion that he was shot, for example. I do think almost certainly the court would have ruled that had to be treated separately because it's not necessarily connected. I also don't think they're really ready to prosecute anyone on that case yet, unless they found that missing marker they were looking for on the gun that Nick Houck sold. We haven't heard about that. If they did, maybe they're ready to move forward with that. But it doesn't really necessarily relate to Brooks Houck or to Joey Lawson, and they're the ones at trial here. So I think the court would have ruled that out and said, no, you can't bring that in. It's not directly connected.
Interesting. And also to follow up on that, are they able to mention Steve Lawson at all or not? That
They
he's already
mentioned
been convicted.
he was discussed nonstop. In fact, for the first week, it was all Steve Lawson. And I could think the jury might have been thinking, maybe they charged the wrong guy. They arrested the wrong Lawson, because they never mentioned Joey. And then finally this week got around to tying Joey back into the case. But yeah, we heard all kinds of statements about related to Steve Lawson. We heard a lot about Steve.
Okay, good. So the jury at least knows about Steve Lawson. They don't know. Shame. Imagine when they find out that Tommy was also killed. Oh, my word.
They don't know that Steve was convicted, that he was charged, that he has been at the recommendation of 17 years sentence from the jury. They don't know any of that.
Oh, wow. Okay. So wait till they find out after the trial.
Yes.
And then we'll get back to my questions. Idiot Win said, thank you so much for your 20-pound sticker. You said, whose skid steer statement came first, Charlie G's or Heather S's? Did police start pushing the skid steer to one after being satisfied with the other's statement? And do you feel that influences weight pointed out by D or CW?
Well, it's a great question, but I don't know the answer. I don't remember which one made the statement first. So I can't answer that.
Interesting.
It's a good question, though. I have to look that up.
The one, if they're playing the one up against the other in a bit of a coercive way, by the sounds of it, that sounds pretty scary. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh dear. Okay. So where were we with these questions? Did I ask you this one? Let me just see. So we went over the defense witness there and how damaging, yes. And so Charlie's testimony. You mentioned the Joseph Lawson's name. Yes, we just spoke about this. Barely came up for days, and yet Girdley's testimony suddenly thrust him into focus. How do you think the prosecution's approach to Lawson as a co-defendant, almost as an afterthought, shaped the defense's strategies for both him and Brooks Houck?
So one of the reasons that Brooks Houck has led the fight for the defense is money. He's got the lawyers being paid by his own money as opposed to lawyers who are public defenders. He's got expert witnesses and the money to fund that. So the deal has been that he would move forward. Now, that may have been the deal with Steve as well, but it ended when he stood up in the middle of a hearing and said, you know what? My lawyer isn't representing me. My lawyer is busy talking to Brooks Houck's lawyer, and he's not really worrying about my interests. And I would like to fire him and get a new lawyer. And the prosecutor stood up and said, we agree. And then the judge allowed him to get a different lawyer. So as far as I do feel like the lawyers who are representing Joey are taking a back seat and allowing Brooks to take the lead. He's got the money. He's got the lawyers who have poured the resources into this. And I think he's been allowed to do that. I don't think that Joey would have to do that, but it is a lot of work and very expensive. And he would not, if it were just Joey in the trial, there wouldn't be a defense remotely like this. I heard from people that the defense during Steve's case was a far, far cry from what we saw this week. It's been a very effective presentation by very good lawyers.
Interesting. So Joseph Lawson's lawyers are public defenders, and Brooks Houck has paid big money for his lawyers.
And he may, I mean, it's possible that Joey has some paid lawyers too, but I don't think he personally would have had money. So he seems to have more than one lawyer. I don't know who has paid each of them, though.
Oh my. Okay. So interesting. Do you think that Joseph Lawson's defense attorneys will make closing arguments?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Because they didn't make opening statements, right? It was just
they reserved it
and Brooks.
So they, in other words, they saved it. And so the one, Brooks, went at the beginning and he covered both sides. And then Joey went right before the defense. So it wasn't that he didn't do it. It's that he did it a lot later than you might have expected.
And from what I had heard for closing arguments, which is taking place tomorrow, on if you're watching this live with us, guys, July 7th of 2025, Monday. It sounds like it's going to be the defense going first and then the state. Is that right?
Yes, that surprised me as well. I was expecting it to be prosecution, defense, prosecution again, but the way they do it, defense goes first and then the prosecution wraps up, and that'll be the end of the case before the jury gets it.
That's quite interesting as well, because the prosecution can hear, okay, defense, bring your best shot. And then,
right.
Well, at least that gives us some hope, right? Nathaniel, thank you for being here. He said, Nathaniel, Nate Hansen, thank you. Gisla's the best. Thank you so much for being here. And again, welcome to Courtroom Confidential, Josh Ritter, T. Suze, and everyone who's just joined as well. Okay, so now let's see what other questions we have here. Wait, we went to, so we answered that one. This is a picture of Nick Houck, who's an unindicted co-conspirator for those watching now. So Amber Bowman's account of Nick Houck's absence. Now, she is his former girlfriend, I believe. So her account of his absence on July 3rd and 4th of 2015 was compelling, but challenged by inconsistencies. How critical do you believe her testimony was in linking Nick and indirectly Brooks to Crystal Rogers' disappearance?
I think it was really, really critical because the story that she told was really different from the one that Nick Houck told. So what she says is, we were in the middle of a move. We were literally moving to this house I hated, where it was a fixer-upper, didn't even have a floor in the bathroom. It was so much of a fixer-upper. And I was very unhappy about moving. Nick and I were already fighting about it. Well, here we are, the weekend we're supposed to be moving, and he disappears. He suddenly announces, I'm going to go with Brooks and help Brooks on this house. And she says, what do you mean? We're moving. And he leaves and is gone for 24 hours overnight and has his phone off the entire time, with her texting him over and over, like, where are you? You can only picture it. They didn't show us what they were, but I already knew what it would be like in my head. And what was the reason for that? Why has he disappeared? Why isn't he there helping her move? That was fully planned. And of course, the prosecution says, well, the reason is because that's the very night Crystal Rogers disappears. And they were obviously busy disposing of stuff, and then he shows up again. And that's why he had his phone not with him. That's why he had literally turned off, like, no communication, no ability to track it with location. And that's why he didn't come home that night. So I think
part is interesting.
She's very important, I think, in terms of linking him in.
Yeah, I think that if I was on the jury, that's going to stick in my mind. So if anyone's confused, let us know in the chat. But Amber Bowman was dating Nick Houck. And I mean, I would be so pissed off if I was dating him. We're busy moving. We're busy packing. It's a stressful time. And he's like, I'm out. I'm going to go help my brother or something. And then phone off. She's trying to call him like 15 times, leaving messages, texting for 24 hours. And then he comes back and I believe he says, oh, hey, I was just working on the house they're going to move into. I was just working on something with Brooks Houck. I mean, that must have infuriated her. When did they break up?
She said it wasn't all that long after that. I thought, I bet it wasn't.
Yeah, makes sense.
Really mad.
But damn, the whole family, especially, maybe that's why the state also named them as unindicted co-conspirators. Maybe the jury will think, they're probably going to charge them later, because that is sus.
I want to mention something too. In the way I remember it actually coming out in opening statement, they said he was a conspirator who had not been charged, which is, in other words, they at no point said he had not been indicted. So I don't know. Has he been? We have no reason to believe it. We know for sure he hasn't been charged. They said that much, but has he been indicted? I don't know the answer.
Interesting. I mean, he was, if anyone hasn't seen my playlist or Lawyer Lee's coverage, he was a former police officer. He was fired. He failed his polygraph test. He got all angry about it. We've looked at all of the interviews as well, because those were made available to the public. Brooks Houck's police interviews and Nick Houck's as well. So yeah, those already made us all go, whoa, there's some red flags here. How do I say this? Okay, let me try. Is it French? Morn Bet. He said, Grizzly K, SA represent from Joshua Ritter, LA co-represent, and the importance of naps. Thank you so much for your $10 sticker and for being here to support us as we discuss this case where, by the way, I saw someone asking, wait, is this trial live? Well, no, there's no live streaming. There's no cameras in the courtroom, which is why it's so great that Lawyer Lee's been in the courtroom taking detailed notes, as she always does, and sharing that with us. Otherwise, the local news has done a good job, though. I must say, WHAS 11, they've done a pretty good job, especially compared to other cases like maybe Delphi.
Right.
Yeah, the local news is going. They're deep diving and also taking notes. But that's why Lawyer Lee's here with us, sharing all of her insights, her wisdom, her notes with us. And I'm so, so grateful. But you got to check out her channel if you want all of it. We can only do so much in an hour, So go there. There's hours worth of content to catch up on, to binge watch, and to get even more of the tea from this trial than we can do here. Okay, so let's see. What other question do I have for you? All right, so then Denver Butler, retired homicide detective's testimony, praised the thoroughness of the police investigation, contrasting the coercion allegations. So how effective do you think this, because that was a defense witness from what I'm understanding. So how effective do you think this defense strategy was in countering the prosecution's circumstantial evidence?
I thought it was pretty strong. One of the things that he did, he was just a perfect expert witness, just this beautiful background with police work that was really persuasive and effective. And he just went through the incredible lengths to which the law enforcement had gone to try to figure out any piece of evidence, anything that would connect Brooks Houck or anyone else for that matter to the disappearance of Crystal Rogers, and how far they had gone to try to find her body and to try to pull together some of the evidence that would have been concrete, and they never could. And he just went through, search after search. He literally put it all together and said, and then they searched here, and then they searched here, and they found nothing, and they searched here and found nothing, and then they went here and they looked at this car and they found nothing. And it just went on. And I think it was pretty effective in terms of forcing the jury to realize that there'd been every attempt to find this information, and they really could not. Now, is that enough to counter all of the comments, mostly by Joey, but also the weird story by Brooks about what happened? I mean, that's a completely different question. But was it effective? I thought it was.
Pretty good strategy from the defense. Like, let's get this awesome retired homicide detective in. Come here, sir. Tell us what a great job you've done. And did you find anything to prove this? No. Wow, that's so scary, because, I mean, I'd been following the case for quite a while, and just every time you're like, oh, they're searching here. Okay, they're digging up there. We have hope all over again. Like, oh my word, they're going to find Crystal, but they haven't yet.
Right.
In 2025, 10 years later, no sign of Crystal Rogers. That is so scary if they get away with this, or even the others, if they never charge. It really is, it's a very concerning case, very scary. Yes. Okay, so let's see what else I have here for you. Was that the final question on that slide? Wait. No, stop it. We're not there. Okay, Denver Butler, yes. Also, one of the witnesses was outed, right, for being anonymous on Oxygen, on that Oxygen documentary. Yes. Wasn't that a bit hectic? I'd heard that they said, oh, you were on the Oxygen documentary, but your voice was changed. Oh, my word.
It wasn't. It was somebody who had like not all that much to say. Like someone, I cannot remember who it was, but they were driving by and saw the vehicle on the side of the road or something like that. It didn't seem like the kind of thing that you would be so embarrassed, that, oh, please don't let the public know about this. So I thought it was kind of interesting that he would need his voice disguised. And I want to give a shout out to Mama Pink. She's one of our mods.
Nice. Yeah, welcome to everyone from your channel as well, from your community. Mama Pinks, thank you so much. We said we love Lawyer Lee. No, we love Lawyer Lee. Shall we fight about it on this Sunday? We do. The Grizzlies do. No, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, so we're going to go through some of the witnesses as well after these questions, because I think we're nearing the end of my questions, just about. Hold on. So the prosecution, that's Shane Young, the prosecutor, I believe, right? That's a picture of him. Yes. Am I correct? Okay. Yeah. So the prosecution emphasized phone records. I think those are pretty important in this case, showing intense communication among Brooks Houck, Steve Lawson, Tammy, Joseph Lawson, plus calls about window tinting. Do you think this evidence strongly supports their narrative, or did the defense's explanation about the stolen car issue weaken its impact?
So Interesting question, and I'll kind of divide it down into two parts. First of all, the window tinting. The reason that was important, the prosecution says that just 2 days before Crystal disappears, Brooks gets this super dark, actually illegal level of window tinting on his windows on his car. And they say the reason for that is he has this elaborate plan for how he's going to dispose of the body, which involves people not realizing that Crystal is not in the car, and they're going to think she's in the car with him, and it's all going to throw the timetable off. So that's the Commonwealth theory about what's happening. So then it got really, there was talk about Steve and Tammy also getting their car tinted, or at least calling about window tinting. We never got an end to that. Did it happen? Did they actually do it? Did they do it before or after? And why? We never got that. But we did get a pretty good explanation from Brooks Houck's side that their child, the child he had with Crystal, Eli, who was 2.5, was born with a congenital eye defect, so that there was some kind of nerve that wasn't developed that should have been developed. And as a result, he's very sensitive to light, and his eyes have a lot of trouble. And so the argument was the tinting was already on Crystal's car. It was put on the sister's car when the sister took Eli after, all of this happened. And then also Brooks got it on his car. And the whole reason for that was they were trying to protect the child. So I felt like that kind of didn't go anywhere, because they did have medical records and testimony about this issue with Eli. So that's one part of your question. But the other part of your question was about that stolen car. That was the craziest story, because it was Steve Lawson's ex-girlfriend, who had been his girlfriend in a period when he was broken up with his wife, now he was back together with his wife, Tammy. And they, in that period of time, very foolishly bought a car together and financed it together with both their names from Capital One. And so that very night, Steve Lawson had taken the car from Heather Snellen, and she spotted it in the parking lot of a bar. She still had her keys. She swiped the car and took it and hid it somewhere. And so that very night, there are all these text messages from Tammy to Steve that pretty clearly relate to the fact that their car's been stolen. And the argument from the defense is all of these phone pings that you're getting, those aren't Steve Lawson going to find Crystal Rogers' car. It has nothing to do with that. This is Steve Lawson trying to figure out where his stolen car was taken.
Oh, man. It sounds like it could be plausible to some of the jurors.
Actually, I thought it was plausible. I thought it was, it was a pretty good story, and they had a lot of text messages that backed it up, and some physical evidence as well.
Oh, man. So, yeah, we'll have to see what gets decided soon this week.
Right.
So that is one of the questions. Wait, let's just get back to where we were with the prosecutor. So the defense accused prosecutor Shane Young of allowing Charlie Girdley to lie in the grand jury about not receiving promises, supported by interrogation clips. How serious are these allegations, and why do you think the prosecution didn't push back more forcefully? Like, it sounds like they didn't argue strongly. No, we didn't. We didn't offer him anything. Or so. What do you think of that?
Right. There were statements during the clip that was played in the court where Shane Young says, I'm here to help you. We'd like to help you. And then you have Charlie Girdley 2 weeks later telling the grand jury, no one has helped me. And there could be some explanation behind that, like it hadn't happened yet, or he wasn't sure that would happen. There could be something like that. I thought it was a pretty significant statement related to what the prosecutor had done. My guess is he didn't push back because he didn't really have a pushback. That if he had had statements that clarified it or made it a little less of a problem, I think he would have used those. And he didn't. He just let it drop. Is that the issue they're going to decide on? I don't think so, but it was unfortunate for the Commonwealth, because I think it's going to cause the jury to question what is so important, and that's the credibility of the entire case being presented. So you don't want that, and it's unfortunate.
Oh, man. Okay. Also, I see people are also asking, what is your gut feel about Rosemary Houck? And was she there? She's not in the courtroom, right?
Right. She hasn't been there at all, nor has Nick been there at any point. So as far as, I guess they're asking me, would they be indicted as conspirators? They were both named during opening statements as conspirators. So we know the prosecution has them in its sights. It would like to charge them if it could come up with a way to do that. As far as whether they have enough, I think they'll make the decision based on what happens in this trial. If there's a quick conviction, I think we probably will see Rosemary and Nick get charged as well. But if it takes a while or it goes for the defense, obviously I think they won't charge them. They're somewhat, the one difference would be if Nick has any involvement that they can prove in the death of Crystal's father. Now that's another issue entirely.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I would love to see that. I would love to see justice for Crystal Rogers in this trial at the end of this. And then, oh man, get the handcuffs out. Get some of those others that you named. That would be interesting. But we'll have to see what the outcome of, because I mean, obviously, if the outcome of this trial doesn't go that way, I don't think they're going to be indicting the others or charging the others. Oh dear. Okay, also, I don't think this was included in my questions, but tell us about the little pink pigs. Your thumbnail. You got me on the thumbnail. You were like, little pink pigs. I'm like, what is that? So tell us about that, because I believe Brooke's sister was a defense witness, right?
Right. Well, remember that really atrocious, horrifying comment by Girdley about plucking Crystal's hair and teeth and feeding her to the hogs, okay? Or quote, let the hogs do the rest. And so then an obvious question was, do the Houcks have hogs? Is this a thing? Or is there any hog farm connected to this in some way? And no one had mentioned it or asked it. So in the course of her testimony, she said, well, we don't have hogs. We do have pigs. They're family pigs. They all have names. The children name them. My mother names them, but the kids give them their own names. And they're just little pink pigs. Now, they had a picture of, the kids with the pigs, but they're a little bigger than, when I think of a little pink pig, I'm thinking of a cute little thing with a curly tail, right? That is not what they looked like. They were big and had black spots on them. They weren't hogs, I guess, but they were not small either. They were, good sized.
They weren't teacup pigs.
Yeah, they were not.
Right. So do you think that would still leave the jury wondering if it's possible, this whole hog story, or no?
Oh, I think so. I think that's one of the statements you can't get out of your head. I just think it's very hard. I think even though defense did a great job casting doubt on what he had said, it's going to be hard to move past that or ignore it.
I don't know. Sorry to throw shade. I just don't know if I would trust any of the Houck members on the stand for the defense. Like if they're like, it's just little pink pigs, but then you can see on the picture, no, it's not. I mean, how much more do you trust after that? The whole family is almost just about implicated in this, named, so sure, I don't know how I would take that. Thank you, Marlon Maastricht from the Netherlands. Thank you so much. My former home, South Africa, Netherlands, Switzerland. Thank you so much for being here as well. Okay, let's see if I have another question on this slide for you. Oh yeah, with closing arguments set for July 7th, what key points do you expect the prosecution and defense to emphasize based on this week's evidence? How might the judge address the coercive interrogation issue in jury instructions to guide deliberations?
Okay, and let me give a shout out to Marlon, our other mod. So good to see him in the chat as well. So I think it's going to be the key battle, and it's going to be long. Brooks House lawyer said it's going to take him 2 hours. Wow, that's a really long closing, and that doesn't even count Joey. And then, of course, the prosecution will get its response. But I think what the defense is going to focus on is the lack of any kind of concrete evidence. No body, no eyewitness, no crime scene. We heard that over and over and over again. And I think that's going to be the focus. Add to that, they're going to focus on the evidence you do have was coerced and it can't be trusted. All of these statements that you've heard, those simply weren't trustworthy. And then for the Commonwealth, I think they're going to put up all of those statements and say, okay, take Girdley's out, but they'll read them again. So it'll again be in their minds. Take Snellen's out. you've still got Greer, and you've still got, they're going to name other witnesses. All of these people said similar things, that Joey Lawson was admitting pretty much what he'd done. So don't be saying that you can eliminate all of that. You can't. So I think they'll put that up. And then I think they'll emphasize Brooks' irrational story about what happened and Nick's irrational story about what happened. And they're going to say, we can tell what really went on. You don't have to have a body to decide this case. You just have to have your common sense. That was what he said over and over in opening. Use your common sense. And I think it's going to happen again.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when a case takes 10 years like this one to get to trial, I feel like that could already, influence the jury slightly, just depending on what the evidence is shown, to think, whoa, but it took 10 years to get here. Like, surely they mean business. But with Anita Knudsen's case, that was a cold case. That lady, Nicole Rice, was acquitted. So you just never know. The timing doesn't really have a factor from what I learned from that case, depending on what evidence they bring. So closing arguments sound like they're going to be interesting. I believe you're not going to be in the courtroom for that one, right?
Right. I'm back home.
You're back home, but obviously, luckily then we can all fall back on the local media. I'm sure they'll be reporting on it as well. That's the Monday, and defense will go first. And there's obviously Brooks Houck's defense team and Joseph Lawson's. I think they said Joseph Lawson's one will be taken an hour and Brooks Houck 2 hours. And I remember you saying last week that Brooks Houck's defense took so long. That's why we want to say less is more.
Right. That's exactly right. And he said they're not going to send the jury out until the next day, until Tuesday. So tomorrow will just be closing arguments and then jury instructions. That usually takes a good half hour.
Yes, sometimes longer, right? We've seen some really lengthy ones sometimes in some cases. So yeah, at least the judge is aware. He can read the room. Damn, the defense is going to take 2 hours and then another hour. So that's 3, and then lunch, and then the state's closing arguments after that. Yeah, they're going to be exhausted.
Yes.
Go home, deliberate the next day. So I wonder, do you think, I mean, I know none of us have a crystal ball. Do you think there would be a verdict by Tuesday evening, afternoon, or do you think it'll take a few days?
I do. I think it'll be quick. I think it'll be by Tuesday afternoon.
Ooh, interesting. Can't wait. And we'll have to look where? On X, on Facebook, on local news? I think to be refreshing Google.
Yeah, I think it'll be all those places. But yeah. I'll cover it as well, and we'll kind of do a recap of what some of the key evidence was and why I think the jury went the way it did.
Yes, and when are you going to do that?
When the jury comes back. So it'll probably be Tuesday would be my guess.
Excellent. Hopefully I'll be in chat, unless I think I will be, but sometimes the time zone. Yeah. It might be 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning, but I might be there anyway. So will justice for Crystal Rogers be served? In your opinion, do you think the state has enough?
I do. I think they have enough. I think it's obviously, you can absolutely never say what a jury is going to do. There are always surprises with the jury. I do think some of them would have resonated with the idea of this coercive police tactic being wildly inappropriate. I think we will have some jurors who were upset about that, and they should be. I was upset about that. And so I feel like that will happen. But I think the Commonwealth has a great deal of evidence that they presented. So certainly I think there's plenty to justify a verdict. I usually try not to take an overt opinion, but I think there's plenty to justify a verdict if the jury goes that way.
Interesting. So if you guys didn't hear earlier, and I'm saying it, sorry if you hear the whole time, I'm on repeat, go and check out Lawyer Lee's channel. I'm also going to go there, subscribe, notifications on, because we don't want to miss it when Lawyer Lee goes live, when the verdict comes in. We want to hear that discussion. We want to hear what it was. That's the place, because there's no cameras in the courtroom. So we're not going to be able to, do the usual verdict watch. Obviously, if this trial had cameras in the courtroom, we would have watched it together. But thanks to Lawyer Lee, we can kind of sort of be part of it. So thank you so much again for all your excellent coverage. So now I made a list here of all the state's witnesses, just in case some of these jog your memory of something that maybe we didn't talk about yet that you thought, oh, we must talk about that. For example, maybe the cadaver dogs. I know there was a lot of testimony about that as well.
Yes. So they used a cadaver dog to go into an impound lot where the white Buick of Brooks Houck's grandmother was being kept. And the dog alerted on the back of the trunk, right at the corner passenger side in the trunk. Not really clear why the corner, but that was exactly where it was. And so the defense brought in a dog expert as well to say this dog wasn't trained. All of his documentation about this so-called training was lost. There's no video of him alerting, no photograph of him alerting. We can't really trust that. So you can take it whatever way you want, but the dog did alert on that trunk. And the alert, let me be clear, was for human remains, not for a live person, but for human remains. He had two different alerts, and he cleared the entire lot for live, no one through for human remains, and that's when he alerted on the vehicle.
That is pretty interesting, because we've heard quite a bit about this white Buick along the way.
Right.
So that's some new, interesting evidence, but nothing, they can't really tie that to anything, right?
Yes, they have not really tied it to, they found two different witnesses testified that this white Buick, a white Buick, was sitting in the middle of the road in the property right behind the Houck's property in the middle of the night on the night Crystal Rogers disappeared. And then there were sightings of this white vehicle at various places, but there was never any clear indication other than it being right there in the middle of this path/driveway on this property right next to the Houck's. That's why they thought, let's find that white Buick. Then they discovered, to their surprise, that Anna Whitesides had one, Brooks Houck's grandmother, and then tracked it from there. They did, by the way, sell it. It went on Facebook. Hey, we're looking for a white Buick. And within 4 days, they had sold it in Louisville. And then, fortunately, they had a search warrant. They went out there, discovered it had been sold the day before, and they went and got it out of Louisville.
That's what I remember about it. I was like, wait, is there something about this Buick? Oh, yeah, the shady selling of it. Oh, my word. Okay, so let's see some of these. We went through most of these in week 1. Crystal Rogers' daughter. So there's a whole, if you want to go through all of these witness testimonies, you guys know, go to Lawyer Lee's channel. She went through everything, all of her notes. Let's just quickly see. Yeah, there's the cadaver dog handler as well. The digital forensics expert, Joshua Hickman. That sounds like a very important person in this trial. I think that's going to tie quite a bit together of circumstantial evidence, right? The phone's on and off. And even Crystal's phone, I saw that this week they said it was turned on for a short period. It went off on July 3rd of 2015 at like 9:38, and then on again briefly at 11:37, and then off.
Right? Yes, it was a little bit of a surprise because we had heard up until then that Crystal Rogers' phone went off at 9:30. So the reason that mattered was because Brooks Houck had said in his interview that she was on her phone playing games when he went to bed just after midnight, and that Eli was up running around the house. Then the next morning, he finds Eli in the bed with him. Crystal's gone. He never sees her again. That was his story. But according to what we heard in opening, her phone went dead at 9:23, I think it was, in the evening. And so how's she playing games on her phone after midnight if it's dead? Well, what we heard from we heard then about the fact that it did go dead, but that it came on for like 30 seconds and then was shut down permanently, never again turned on until law enforcement found it in her car sitting on the Bluegrass Parkway. And then they, of course, used it as evidence.
Interesting. I missed a good question earlier. Bernie H said, hi, G. Hi, Lawyer Lee. Question, is there anything about Brooks or the Houck's family finances, irregularities, IRS, etc.? Crystal had told her mom that she had knowledge of something big. Her mom wished she'd asked Crystal more, because Crystal apparently told her mom that the day before she was last seen.
So it's a really good question, but there are no answers around that. There were rumors, yes, that there was some kind of financial impropriety going on. We do know that just the week before Crystal went missing, there was an accountant who testified and said that Brooks was trying to look into getting a new accountant. Now, he testified that he told this guy his mother was handling the books. So, but there's suggestion that I've heard outside, but I don't remember hearing it in the trial, that maybe Crystal was doing the books. And what Brooks was trying to do was account for the fact she was about to go missing permanently, and he needed someone to take over the books. Then there's also the fact that 2 IRS agents were involved in the case and testified at trial about recordings they found in Rosemary Houck's house. So then that makes you think, okay, why? Why are the IRS agents actually involved in this? And they simply said that they were there as part of trying to find motive. But at no point did they say, and here's this problem Brooks had. We found out he was laundering money, or, he was cheating on his taxes. We heard none of that. Taking cash under the table. I mean, we just didn't hear that. You do hear rumors that there were drugs or other illicit activity, but there was none that came out at all in evidence at trial.
Oh, man. Okay, so no answers there, unfortunately. Thanks for the question, Bernie H. There was another question I had from something here, which was Owen McKenna, the Dollar General manager, testified about seeing Crystal's maroon Impala on the Bluegrass Parkway on July 3rd and 4th. And from the 3rd, it was around 10 p.m., which also contradicted Houck's timeline. So that could also be important for the jury.
Yeah, he said he got off work at 10:15, I think. He closed, so that would mean he would leave 10:15, probably more 10:15. So he would have seen her vehicle roughly 10:30 on the Bluegrass Parkway on his way home. And importantly, he closed that night and then he opened first thing in the morning. So he's coming back through at 7 a.m. and sees the vehicle still there. So that became some important testimony, again, to contradict what Brooks had said, because what's her vehicle doing there? If she's at the farm with him and then goes home with him, why? Why would her vehicle be sitting on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway with a flat tire?
Having a surprise romantic date in the mud.
Yeah.
Right. Hopefully that story sticks as well. They better tell the jury about that again, because that's the one that's like, no, man, no. We already start doubting there, Brooks Houck story. And lastly here, so there's all sorts of witnesses here, the defense witnesses, because oftentimes we'll see the defense just rests. They don't actually bring experts, but this time they had 6 witnesses. One we discussed is already Rhonda McElvoy, Houck's sister, talked about the little pink pigs.
Pink pigs, yeah.
Heath Fathering, the dog handler, also testified on July 2nd, questioning the credentials of the cadaver dog used in the Buick search, saying that they were tracker dogs and cadaver dogs, right, at the same time.
Right. And they've been cross-trained, and he said that FEMA recommends against that and that it's considered not as good.
Okay. And then Dr. Jeffrey Neuschatz, or however he says it, the psychologist, about the read technique, pointing that out that there were violations. Denver Butler, that was a strong defense witness, saying what a great job they actually did in this investigation and didn't find Crystal, unfortunately. And then there was an unnamed cognitive psychologist. Is that so? An unnamed one.
That's the same as Jeffrey Neuschatz, as far as I know.
Oh, okay. I was just like, who's the unnamed one? Okay. And then the chief of police, Jeffersontown prosecution rebuttal, testified briefly, stating he did not use the read interrogation techniques, countering the defense's coercion claims because he said he wasn't trained in it, right?
Right. I didn't get the point of him coming out. Like, what was the point of that? He just said that they put him on the stand just very briefly in rebuttal, and they said, do you use these? Have you ever been trained in them? And he said, no. How does that help them if they were using them? I just didn't understand what the prosecution was aiming for there.
Yeah, right. Like, okay, so you're not training it, but you're using it, because we can see that with our own eyes. A little bit of gaslighting from both sides, from the little pink pigs that are not so little. And then also this, we don't use the retake. Well, I wasn't training it, but you're using it, sir.
Right.
Maya said, do we know of a motive? I never understood the why.
Such a great question. Such a great question. And the jury is going to be really wishing they knew that as well. There really wasn't any attempt to offer one. One of the suggestions by rumor was this idea of financial impropriety. Well, we didn't get that. The only thing we got a hint about was that Rosemary Houck, the mother of Brooks, didn't like Crystal. Didn't like her hair, the fact that she was a mother 4 times. And in fact, didn't like her so much that we got this interesting detail this week, that she actually went over to Crystal's house after she disappeared and dug up the flowers she had planted. Like, wow, that is intense. So we know Rosemary didn't like her. There was also a little bit of a hint that maybe Brooks was concerned that they were going to split up and that Crystal would take Eli with her, but there wasn't really any support for that. There was a little bit of a hint of it, but no witness who came in and, was real clear about, yes, that's what there was real concern about. She was about to leave and she was going to take Eli, and Brooks felt like he had no shot in the court system of getting any visitation, because why wouldn't he? It seems like he would get visitation.
That seems the most likely motive, possibly, though, for the jury. I'm just thinking, if they're thinking, well, what is the motive here? Maybe they could go with custody, because I don't know what else, especially for the whole family to sort of be named as being involved in some way, shape, or form. So that's going to be very interesting. Sky Goddess said the best duo. Thank you so much. And Bernie H, thank you so much for the super sticker. And I think some of your communities here as well, they were just saying hi to you as well. Again, thank you all for being here as well from Lawyer Lee's channel. If you've never heard of me, my name is Grizzly K. This is Grizzly True Crime. I'm South African. I live in Switzerland, and I welcome you all here. And obviously, the door is always open to you, Lawyer Lee. Yes, well, thank you. Can be back anytime.
And this afternoon, I'm going to be putting up a video. I did an interview of a local reporter who has covered the trial. He was actually on the Bluegrass Parkway when they found her car. So it's a real interesting interview, and I think your folks would enjoy it.
Oh, yes. What time? Do you know, like, from now, how many hours till it comes out?
It'll take me probably an hour to get it put up, something along that line.
Okay, nice. So everyone, make sure you subscribe to Lawyer Lee. Let's all put our notifications on, and let's look and be in the comment section then. Will it be a premiere or a video upload or what?
It'll be a premiere.
Ooh, we're going to be in the chat. We're definitely going to see you there. So Grizzly, let's go over there. Once the video is up, of course, now just make sure you are subscribed and all of that. And then I'll probably see you all there in the chat as well. So anything else that you want to say before we go?
No, it's an honor to be here. Shout out to the Grizzlies.
Yes, and thank you so much. This is a dream come true for me. Personally, I've wanted you as a guest for a long time. And I'm actually so excited that you reached out. You reached out to me. I was like, what? This is amazing. Please come here. So thank you so much. We really, really appreciate all your detailed notes, your coverage and everything. And I look forward to seeing your video later.
Great.
All right, everyone. I will see you all again very soon as well. If you guys didn't see my video that I uploaded, there was one from yesterday and one from today, which is all about Coburger. Go and check that out while you wait for Lawyer Lee's video too. And then we'll see you all again very soon. Thank you, Mods. Thanks, everyone, for the stickers, the support, and everything. And yeah, see you soon. Bye, everyone.